And we're here in Wilmington, North Carolina, part of Next Gen Network's coverage of Eastern's 2013. I'm Brian Jones here with Mario O'Brien, and we've got ourselves the first of two semifinal games. Minnesota facing off against Colorado. Both of them surprises to be here, Mario, but the real story so far is the weather today.
Yeah, we lucked out yesterday. As you can see, it's not looking good here today. It's a lot of rain, a lot of wind. The ultimate hasn't been pretty, and it's been an equalizer here in as we saw in the quarterfinal rounds. As I don't think we have any #1 seeds in the semis right now.
In the other semi will have UNC versus UCF. Both were UCF a 3 seed in their pool and UNC a 2. And we're about to get started. Colorado is going to be on defense to start off there in the yellow. We've got high winds right now, have just picked up before the start of the game, and it's been raining all day. The forecast is literally calling for tons of rain. Colorado gets off the first pole just past the midfield stripe. Picking up the disc for Minnesota is one of their top players, Josh Klan. He's been doing very well for them this weekend, Mario.
Yeah, Josh Klan really has separated himself from the pack a bit as a thrower at this tournament. Really been able to slice and dice his way through zones today, as well as yesterday in the game we watched.
They're trying to take a deep shot to Aronson. That one's going to float too far out of bounds. The wind here going downwind, but also changing directions rapidly as we go. Now Colorado working with the wind. And a quick turnover there leads to a Minnesota chance on the goal line. Klain looking for Cheetah in isolation, not available. Now Klain going for the around. Cheetah can't hang on to it, and that's going to be the story of the game so far. We've seen that in our previous matchup on this field. A lot of drops, disc is wet, and the wind's not going to help, and another turnover.
You gotta let me know when I'm off.
It's going to be a game of grit and mental toughness for both sides. Klain on the goal line. High release flick to Aronson. Minnesota on the board first, up 1-0.
Nice throw there by Klain. He actually made a couple nice throws throughout the course of that point. Had a nice backhand break to Cheetah. Cheetah couldn't hang on this one. You're going to see him wait for his window, wait for Aronson to just slide towards the break side, then high release flick it into the window for the 1-0 lead.
Colorado coming off of a surprise upset of Wisconsin. Team that won their pool yesterday in one of the more exciting games we saw. Wisconsin over UNC on double game point. Colorado, though, finding their swagger. Yesterday, Coach Jim Shetler talking about how they have been a disappointing season for Colorado Mama Bird, but now they've seemed to find their groove, winning pre-quarters, avenging a loss over Tufts from Stanford Invite, now beating Wisconsin in the quarterfinals, finding themselves in a real shot to make it to the finals.
Yeah, at this point in the season, when it comes to finding your swagger, just any way that you can get a win. No, it's not necessarily about playing clean ultimate. If you can, great. But any way that you can find success, it's just going to help you build that confidence. And hopefully will allow them to regroup after this tournament, after what's been a tough season for them, coming off of some nice wins here at Eastern, and let that momentum carry them through the series.
We talked about how Reznikov's game plan for Minnesota was to throw a lot of zones in the first half. They just came off of a win over UNC Wilmington on this field. I have to wonder if he will continue to stick to that game plan, or with the wind and the weather, go with the best zone option. We'll see how Colorado deals. Colorado losing earlier this season to Arizona, having some difficulties in zone at Pres Day.
You know, the danger with playing zone, especially with playing conservative zone, is that it just allows the offense to make a lot of easy passes. Notice Colorado right now not challenged on any of these passes, which is exactly what you want. A lot of people think, oh, tough conditions, let's play zone. Well, a lot of times zone offense is just a string of easy passes, and the goal is really to force difficult passes. A lot of times in wind and weather like this, it's almost as effective to just go with a forehand mark. Those forehands are really tough to throw with the slippery wet disc. And here we can see Colorado working the disc with relative ease and unchallenged throws.
Mara, you actually found yourself in a game at Club Nationals against Furious that involved a lot of wind. Is that the strategy you guys employed?
Yes and no. The difference in those games is that it wasn't wet, and so we mixed it up. And at Nationals it wasn't about the wetness. It was upwind downwind, and so there were times whenever we were going downwind that we would put in a line that was not necessarily our O or our D line, but we would put in our zone line when we were going downwind, so that on a turnover we could throw our four-man trap zone.
Colorado trying to move it in here. We've already had several turnovers on this point alone. Janice looking for Chow, and there's an easy turnover. Minnesota can take advantage 10 yards out, and those can be critical in this game. Field position does become a point of emphasis with this much wind. And Minnesota taking a timeout, trying to take advantage of a break opportunity early on. Minnesota up 1-0. And we're going to go to a commercial here. We'll be right back to see if they can make it a lead to 2. Next Gen Network's coverage of 2013 Easterns. And we're back here in Wilmington, North Carolina. Minnesota with the early 1-0 lead over Colorado, trying to make it 2. Sam Tucker with the disc coming out of a timeout. Vertical stack. Typical end zone offense. We've seen Tucker going with the inside break, and Minnesota can't hang on. Slippery conditions really impacting play early on.
Colorado. And this is a great strike here by Colorado. Didn't make the catch, but now you're going to make Minnesota work the entire field again.
Minnesota, Vic, and that's going to lead to another turnover. Mental toughness is going to be such an important part of this game. In these windy games, it's not necessarily about your physical strength, but your mental capacity to be constantly playing defense and just keep up and stay with it.
Yeah, you can't have any turnover stick with you. You got to have that goldfish memory, short memory, and just anything that happens, you got to know that you're going to get another chance to play offense, and you just got to stick with it. I really think that these conditions obviously they favor great throwers.
And Minnesota can't hang on yet again.
Great throwers and great catchers.
And the other semifinal will be here at 1 p.m. UCF versus UNC. Colorado looking again for the deep strike with 2 defenders in the air. This one's going to circle back. Nobody can hang on to anything right now. And wind back and forth they go. Colorado still looking for that first goal. We saw in the last game, UNCW huck it at will. Minnesota stayed much more patient, was able to get it upfield and then take an appropriate shot. Colorado here is trying to work it. The wind's dying down a little bit. Just before this game, the wind actually popped up, and we're seeing a lot of missed catches because of the rain.
Yeah, the type of drops we're seeing right now is that the disc just keeps spinning when you're trying to catch it, and you just don't get that grip on it. We've seen multiple catches where you clap it and it just keeps spinning and then slides right out. Might be interesting to see if there are players wearing gloves that are having more success or not. I know that I've experimented with some gloves, and that's one thing that I do notice. I don't necessarily notice a big difference in my throwing, but certainly with the catching, I feel a little bit more sure that I can be more aggressive with that catch. We'll see if it has any type of effect here today.
Colorado really just playing hard man defense here, which could be a good strategy in the wind. You really want to be tight just in case there's any fluttery disc that you can come down with.
Well, and also it just puts that extra bit of pressure on the offense here. Mama Bird playing man defense, every pass is challenged. And here we see Minnesota playing their zone D, and you know, before we had that D, we saw 4 different passes that were just basically nice backhand clap catches right in the middle, right in the chest.
This disc here going up. Vogel getting the tip, and it comes back inbounds. Colorado almost saving possession. Either way, it's coming back.
Looks like we had a foul on the throw.
Is there any type of grip change you make to your forehand when you go into this weather? I know into the wind you're going to try to put more spin on it, but then when you're going into the rain, you've really got to reel back and you can't put much power on it or else it's going to slip.
Yeah, I changed my grip to backhand is what I do in the rain. You know, as a coach, I go into these situations and I'm saying the team that can throw more backhands is the team that's going to have more success because the backhand is just an easier throw overall in the wind. And more control, more touch.
Speaking of that, Colorado gets off the backhand to space, and James Mitchell's able to reel it in for the score. Excuse me, Zach Nager able to bring it in. Colorado tied at 1 here early on.
The rain has died down here a little bit, at least relative to 20 minutes ago. It was pouring. Still a bit windy here.
Everybody's a bit soaked from last game. You're not able to dry off your hands as easily when all of your gear. But the wind has been very variable since the beginning of this game, gusting in every single direction, it appears, based on our flag shots. And we'll see if Mikkel's going to come in and start anchoring this defensive line. He's known for his backhands, who could be a big advantage in this game.
And I think that you mentioned the defensive line, like in a game like this, in a game where conditions play such a huge factor in the game, you really have to change your strategy. It's not about O-line or D-line. It's about, you just have to know that you're going to get the disc back on every single possession. It's just a fact. We haven't seen any point that we've watched today where there hasn't been a turnover. So you really just have to call your lines with that in mind. And it's not about offense or defense. It's about making sure you have throwers on every single line, knowing who you're going to have back to work the disc when there undoubtedly is going to be a turnover.
And Colorado poaching against Minnesota. Minnesota choosing to run regular offense and able to go through the middle. Klein, Aronson puts a forehand down the middle, and it's not going to get there.
And that throw was just too touchy. I call it too cute. Every single throw that you play in the wind has to be deliberate and intentional, and you can't just flick and touch a throw out there in any case. You really got to step, pivot strong, and stay balanced.
Looks like the consolation games on the other fields have been canceled for Eastern, so we've got the spotlight here. The only games left on the day, these 2 semifinals and finals. Klein going deep, and defender is not there. Aronson catches it in front of his defender's face.
And that's a throw. I mean, Evan Klein, one of the players on the field, sporting the gloves, and he really was able to get some zip on that forehand. I absolutely could not get that amount of zip on a forehand with a wet disc in these conditions unless I had gloves, and that has helped me a little bit as I've experimented with those gloves.
And we have a correction there. I said Evan Klein earlier. That would be the older brother, Josh Klein, here on Minnesota. One of the U23 players coming out, and we've seen a lot of U23 players this weekend here. We'll see the replay in Klein. You said, good snap on the forehand. Former next-gen player Greg Aronson reeling it in.
We talked a bit yesterday about what teams we could see in the semis at nationals, and I really like this Minnesota team. By no means do I think that they're a lock to go deep into the tournament at nationals, but what they do have on their side is consistency between Klein, Aronson, Tachita. Those guys are really reliable, and the way that Minnesota plays is also very consistent. They don't rely on the big play. They've got some skilled throwers, but they've also got a disciplined offense. They've got multiple defensive looks. And that's the type of thing that can take you deep into a tournament. When you don't rely on the big ball, you can rely on staying in games.
That one pops up for Colorado, trying to work it down the field, and nobody can come up with it. You know, today, after today, the elements are certainly surprising. You can definitely make things go one team's way that normally wouldn't win the game, but we have UNC beating Pittsburgh and UCF taking down Oregon on Universe. Those are two teams that we thought that could make a semifinals run, and now maybe we're underestimating that. At the same time, though, when you get to nationals, there's a reason why these programs seem to be the same every year in and out. The experience is incredible. Pittsburgh was only able to recently make the leap.
And Pittsburgh didn't necessarily have that nationals experience. As we see Aronson reel in another goal, Pittsburgh didn't necessarily have that experience, you know, in national finals, but the area that they do have experience in is winning, because that group of players has played together through the Pittsburgh Youth League. They've played together for multiple years, and they have that chemistry. Not necessarily winning on the biggest stage, the college stage, but they've played together for so long that allowed them to find success.
Minnesota now up 3-1 in Colorado. And so far, Colorado has been unable to find the consistency to match what Minnesota has been able to do with working it up the field. And Charlie Resnikoff, head coach of Minnesota, telling us that he thought that his top 6 players could hang with anybody in the country, and so far that's proven true.
Yeah, I agree. He's got star power. Tachita makes plays. Evan Klain, great thrower. Aronson does a little bit of everything. They're deep. Minnesota's looking good right now.
Minnesota with the pole. Mickle. Janice. Not really seeing too many Hawks in the last game. We saw teams try to get it to their best thrower. Mickle. Wind still being variable now to crosswind. Throws behind, bounces in the air. Colorado comes up with it. Snyder. Pops up in the air. Cheetah comes down with it.
That's what I'm talking about. That throw on the backhand side is just a lot easier. Throwing a forehand in the wind in conditions is difficult.
This one going deep, Minnesota, and Mitchell makes sure that one's not going to be caught.
Nice block there by Mitchell, but also I really like what I'm seeing from Klain. He knows the cost benefit of that shot at this point in the game, at that spot in the field. He knows that's a risk worth taking. If I hit it, great, goal. If I miss it, now we've got Colorado having to work the full 70 in pretty tough conditions.
Colorado with the disc, going over the top to Mickle. Ruled out of bounds after the bobble. Minnesota's going to get this one back and could be key here. Klain trying to go inside, hits the defender. And here we go, Mickle using that backhand strength. And Klain slams it down.
Coach Shetler really getting vocal on the sidelines. Too many open receivers for Minnesota.
Coach of Oregon women, Lou Burris, talked about how his game plan for winning game at Nationals last year was just play perfect defense. Mental strategies, very important. So we go again, another deep shot from Colorado. Mickle comes up with it. Chow. Colorado knocking on the doorstep.
And this is when you often see great players know that they need to step up and touch that disc every other time. There's no question on Colorado who the best thrower is, and that's Jimmy Mickle. He needs to be okay with making the adjustment of making a downfield throw like he just did, or making that crossfield throw, and then just going and getting the disc.
Cheetah, Minnesota again up 3-1, could make it 4 early on. Looking underneath. Back to Cheetah, can't get there. Foul called on the play.
Nice job here on the mark. You're going to see you've got a rotated trap mark. That time they didn't quite trap it, but you really want to make them force Minnesota into the teeth of your defense, and that means when you get to the sideline, you're going to go no around, not allow that easy reset back to the middle of the field, and just keep them on the sideline. Really force them to throw those inside outs. You're going to see that bid by Colorado, and that's vintage Colorado defense, playing that back pocket D.
Cheetah gets open in isolation. Throw goes over the top. Mickle reels it in.
Wouldn't be a bad option for Mickle here to just let one loose.
Mickle showing touch with his forehands, throwing directly into the wind. Mickle's length could be very beneficial in this game. He's able to get around those marks that are going to be trying to take away all of those throws. Here, backhand not available. Mickle has no problem moving it to Janis. Pops this one up for Mickle. Playing over the top. Mickle gonna say he had that one. See here if Klain was able to get the clean D.
I think that's a good foul call by Mickle. Had position, had both hands on the disc.
Mickle. We have a pick on the play. Mickle. Janis. Mitchell along the sideline for Colorado. Now everybody's on the far side, and Mitchell unleashes a hammer. Can't reel it in.
That's actually a really good throw there from Mitchell. Got to be able to take some chances sometimes.
Klain looking deep. This one's going to fall in front of both the defender and the receiver. Vogel was on the play as well as Mitchell for Colorado. Janis in his own end zone tries to loft one up, and it's going to be a turnover. Minnesota going to get it on the goal line. Chance to take a 4-1 lead. Klain. Cheetah in isolation. Round backhand can't be caught. Game back and forth. Here will Mickle uncork it. At this point, Mickle's got to go up and get that disc, and he's got to try to do every other throw.
This is a nice throw.
Out to space, still hanging in the air. Vinny Vick celebrating for Minnesota. Klain firing it for Vogel, too far.
If you're wondering about the wind here, this is the death corner right here. All the wind on the field is really blowing right into that corner. And the reason that you're seeing Minnesota with a forehand force is because if you go backhand, it really allows the offense to just get out of trouble with a big backhand hook. We talked about how much easier the backhand throws are than the forehands. There's a nice break to space for Klein.
Minnesota goes up 4-1, takes control of this game.
And we talked a bit about it before. The team that can throw more backhands is going to have more success. That also affects the way you call your defense. You want to make the other team throw as many forehands as possible.
Thanks to Elemental Technologies for providing all of the streaming you see here today. Without them, we would not be able to give you the live coverage of these semis and finals here at Eastern's Next Gen Network, powered by Elemental. And we're going to go to a commercial here. Colorado with a timeout call, trying to regroup. Next Gen Network's coverage of 2013 Easterns. And we're back here in Wilmington, North Carolina. Colorado trying to rebound from an early 4-1 deficit. So far, the wind and rain playing a huge factor in this game. Lots of drops, lots of turnovers. Minnesota, however, has been patient and more consistent. Colorado has shown an inability to work it up the field, and right now they're not taking advantage of Jimmy Mickle's ability to get backhands off. They need to get him in a give-and-go situation to create space.
They just need to have the disc in his hands more. You know, I think for Minnesota right now, the difference is they are making the decision that we just need to have Klein with the disc in his hands as much as possible. Does he have a bunch of turnovers? Yes. Has he busted the offense wide open multiple times? Also, yes. So you're really just you're just placing your bets on your best throwers, hoping that they're able to navigate through the weather, you know, better than someone else who's not as experienced or doesn't have the throws.
Aronson getting set to pull for Minnesota. Opting for the backhand blade.
So with this line with Colorado, with Mickle not out there, who's running the offense? Who's going to be able to slice and dice and work their way up the field?
Minnesota with a 2-3-2 look. So far, the conservative zone has just forced Colorado to make a lot of throws, and they've been unable to work it successfully.
And when you're playing against this conservative zone, you really got to take every single yard that you can. At the very last second, you got to make sure that your body's in front of the disc and just take that extra jump step to get that extra yard. On all these throws, when you're making 20, 30 throws to try to work the disc, if you get an extra yard on each one, that's 30 extra yards that you just gained moving up the field. Lots of little moves like that where you give and go and have your momentum going forward rather than dumps that go backwards. And here we see the conservative zone not working in Minnesota's favor. They're making lots of easy throws unchallenged.
Mitchell on the goal line. Colorado timeout has worked so far. Settled down. A loft over the top. Can't reel it in, Giannis.
That's your mental discipline right there. You've got to know that in no situation in this game should you be throwing anything lofty. There's no such thing as a floaty throw attempt in this conditions. Everything has got to be, like I said, deliberate, low release, tight throws.
Minnesota gives it right back.
Excuse me, I misspoke a little bit. Not everything needs to be low release. Low release when you're going upwind. When you're going downwind, you actually want your release points a little bit higher.
The wind will push that disc down. Giannis, center spot, goes with a backhand break. Colorado gets on the board. Minnesota 4, Colorado 2. We've seen it from both teams here. They've been giving up the backhand breaks instead of shifting to a no around mark going downwind.
Yeah, those backhand breaks have been what's been successful for both teams in the end zone. Also very interesting, I don't know if you noticed in that last point, Colorado did have wide open swings to the near sideline. They could have worked it down here, but Coach Shetler obviously implementing the strategy is that we need to keep the disc on what we call the high side of the field. You always want to be working from the high side going down rather than working from the low side going up. The high side is the upwind side. Generally, if you're working from that side, you're going to have more control and not get yourself into those trap situations.
On the U23 Open team, we've talked about Josh Klain, but also two players other than this game, Jimmy Mickle and Tim Morrissey, will be joining Klain for that this summer. They'll be competing in Toronto. We have many U23 candidates through the weekend that we've seen play as well. Kelson Alexander played yesterday for Wisconsin.
Brian Hart from Wisconsin also.
Colin Camp as well. We'll see Misha Freistatter later today for the second semi. Eddie with the disc, and Colorado switching to zone for the first time, trying to trap against the sideline, forcing them to go with a forehands look. Aronson, they still have this puts the disc in Klain's hands.
Now watch what Minnesota is doing. Every single time for these dumps, watch how they're moving upfield. Now this one's got to be swung off the line, otherwise they're just going to be, see, they lost 5 yards. But notice what they were doing is every time that they were catching that disc, they were taking that extra hop step that was gaining them a couple yards. Every single yard is important, especially when you're working in the wind.
Mickle. Baker moves it up the field. Colorado with a chance to break here, but turnover gives it right back to Minnesota.
See, if I'm Coach Resnikoff right now, I've got to understand and realize right now that the turnovers are happening in less than 3 throws generally when I'm playing man defense. When I'm playing zone, I'm not really taking anything away.
Cheetah. As you said, here comes the crashes from Minnesota. Gaining yards, Colorado trying to push it to the trap side, but they've given Minnesota the ground to the end zone.
This is a tough spot to be in. At this point, it's okay to lose some yards if you need to.
And they go back, Eddie can't hang on to it. Aronson on Mickle with a flat mark. Trying to go back to Baker. Not available for the catch.
I'd really like to see Mickle not attempt that 3-foot forehand. Just hold the disc out there, 2 hands, and just set it in his hands with the backhand.
Klain.
Nice throw by Klain.
Shake and bake throw to Aronson. Inside flick is not available.
And there we did see the nice adjustment by the mark, taking away the around, forcing them to throw that. What was an outside-in throw should have been a flat throw, but it's just a much more difficult attempt.
Colorado trying to angle the stack to the 4 side. It'll be very difficult to get it off the line at this point. Going with the hammer.
Nice throw.
The wind slightly dying down actually at this point, and Colorado still can't hang on. Aronson gets the backhand available. Minnesota runs it down to go up 5-2.
Have we seen a forehand thrown goal yet, Brian, in this game? I think it's been almost all backhands. Multiple backhands to that side of the end zone.
Klain has been the only one able to get it off, and lo and behold, he's wearing gloves. He's the one with the extra grip on the field. Yeah, the wind at this point has died down. I've got to think it's more of a mental havoc that it's playing on the players at this point, that they're just not in the game. You can see players standing around, expecting it. They have to get into an aggressive mindset where they make sure they get the catch and able to go through it and mentally fight through this slow pace. Minnesota just looks much more comfortable at dealing with these conditions. And they're also from the North Central, which is this is standard for regionals. Even for them, they'd even have a little bit of snow on the ground when they'll get back.
Well, I think it's also about how they prepare. We talked a bit about it yesterday, but Minnesota plays multiple different junk defenses, which means that in practice, they're practicing against it. And that's just going to give you a lot of confidence, knowing that you can work through any zone. When you're seeing so many looks, you're not going to be flustered by anything that the defense can throw at you.
Giannis, Chow.
There we see Colorado, again, working towards the high side of the field. Look at, they've got open dumps to the low side or to the downwind side, but they're choosing not to take them. If they do take them, they've got to make sure they do one of two things, either gain yards immediately or bounce it back to the middle of the field. So we'll see if they're able to get it back to the middle. Nice.
A right decision, execution lacking on the catch. Tucker marked by Morrissey. Inside flick, and as we said, the wind has died down a little bit here. Now the forehands upwind are fine. Tucker. Inside break for the score. Minnesota goes up 6-2, and they've got a sizable lead early on.
Yeah, and here we're seeing that depth from Minnesota, whereas the only person who's been able to make some successful throws has been Mickle, and a couple throws from some other players for Colorado. We've got multiple players from Minnesota that are making throws. Tucker this time, Klein lots of times, Tachita, Aronson. Minnesota's looking tough.
At 6-2 here, Minnesota definitely in the driver's seat for this one. Colorado just hasn't been able to find a groove, and you would think with Mickle and Morrissey and some of these other throwing playmakers, they would switch to a philosophy of trying to huck it, because right now they're not adjusting. And even going against the zone, as you said, Mario, it's a stark contrast. They are not attacking with the handlers. They're trying to still do things traditionally with poppers downfield, and they're not gaining yards on those resets which are available.
They're not being aggressive enough in general with their offense. They're not attacking the zone. They're not taking risks downfield, playing field position. And Minnesota is taking advantage of that because they're just getting more looks at the disc, and they've got more good throwers.
Colorado coming out in a spread look. Vic there for the D for Minnesota, but can't quite get it. Nager.
Now we're seeing Mickle back around the disc.
Giannis. Mickle. Working upfield, Nager now on the sideline. Colorado could do with this upwind score. And Mickle is in the end zone. That's a big one for Colorado. 6-3, Minnesota leads.
So in here we're going to just take a look at this sequence. Watch how deliberate Jimmy Mickle is with every single throw. He's going to stay balanced. He gets low. He really goes through his full wind-up motion, and he's lucky because he's long and he's tall. He doesn't have to worry about that mark as much. But every single throw, he's being very deliberate, and this is what Colorado needs. You have to realize that there's one guy on your team who can run the show, and this was Mickle making every single gainer throw. Here, he shakes and bakes up the line, beats his defender, scores the goal.
6-3, Minnesota leads. Colorado needs to start to make moves here, where Minnesota may take half pretty soon. Time is going to be an important factor in this game. Colorado, normally a 6-3 game, you still have time left. You're not going to be panicking, but you need to show a sense of urgency in these windy games because they're going to end earlier and score than you think.
And it's a fine line between finding that sense of urgency but also being patient and composed.
Eddie for Minnesota. Now we're seeing more traditional offenses by both squads clean.
And more traditional offenses because now we're seeing man defense.
Looking for Cheetah. Gets it on the open side. Cheetah unleashes a flick bomb. and reels it in for the score. Oscar with the goal for Minnesota. Ryan Oscar from Jason Cheetah.
And this is a really difficult throw that Cheetah executed with perfection. You want to keep your throws as flat as you can, and often when you play in the wind, that means putting a little more I.O. on the disc. You're going to see he really leans down, it stays I.O., and then the wind catches it, and eventually it trails off and finishes to the outside inside. And that's what we were talking about before. Multiple people for Minnesota can make those types of throws. Colorado only Mickle.
Yeah, on that cut there, he was able to actually get himself in good position, coming around and curling at the end of that, so that way he has an unmarked throw and is able to put that inside out that you're talking about, Mario. 7-3 Minnesota with a point away from taking half. Again, we'll have the next semifinal on at 1 p.m. UCF versus UNC. Aronson.
No, Brian, you really can't say enough about the job that Reznikov has done with this Minnesota program. You look at this team 4 or 5 years ago, you're saying, who is Minnesota? You talk about the North Central, obviously Wisconsin, Carleton. But now you've got Minnesota up there, and it's not just, their success is not just because they have one good player. They've got 4 or 5 good players, along with a supporting cast that are very skilled, and that's about player development. When you have consistency with your coaching staff, you're going to allow players to learn systems, but also get consistent feedback from a true veteran of the game, a great player, a great leader, a great guy in Coach Reznikov.
And you talked about that development, talking about, this was a conversation we had back at Stanford Invite with Tyler Kinley, playing club together. Sub-Zero has been a Minnesota staple for so many years now. So many players come back. Charlie Reznikov was captain for how many years? He was Sub-Zero.
Played Sub-Zero for over a decade.
Turnover there gives it to Minnesota. 10 yards away from sending this to halftime at 8-3 count. Colorado's in big trouble here, and Sam Tucker has big throws near the goal line, looking for the inside break. Often Cheetah in isolation fits it into Aronson, and that's half. Minnesota up 8-3. Not looking back in this one. See here, Tucker, Cheetah looked like he was going to be hit for the isolation goal. Instead, goes with the harder option, threading it through the needle. Tucker, normally a D-line player for Minnesota. You saw Minnesota take half here, putting out their best. We'll be back here in 10 minutes for the conclusion of this game. I'm Brian Jones with Mario Bryan. 2013 Eastern's coverage on Next Gen Network. And we're back here live in Wilmington, North Carolina as Minnesota leads Colorado 8-3. I'm Brian Jones here with Mario O'Brien, and we've got ourselves a dandy of a game with Minnesota playing very consistent, working it up the field.
Yeah, they're a fun team to watch. They've got great players, great coach, great systems. Watch out for these guys at Nationals, and not just at Nationals this year. This is the type of team, this is the type of program that's growing. And I would even say as a program, these guys are moving up into that echelon, at least with Colorado, in terms of their consistency the past few years. That you can start talking about Minnesota as a team that you can start adding into that conversation of national contenders.
I think for them the story is very similar to Pittsburgh, as we talked about 5 years ago in 2008. They weren't at Nationals 2009. They came on the scene and they've been consistently going there. They did miss a year at one point, but they've been in contention every single year. But they've still had that little brother attitude because of the region they're in. They're in the region with Wisconsin and Carleton, and that can be a good and bad thing. One, you're going to get the experience against those top teams more than anybody else is. You get that regional, which is almost like a day at Nationals. You have to go through that bracket, which is incredible experience. And
sectionals. You know, even before regionals, they're getting so many games against all these teams.
Yeah, they play Carleton usually for the sectional title or conference title as it is now. But for them, the story's going to be about same way almost for Pittsburgh. Can they overcome that little brother mentality? They've lost a lot of games. They need to find their confidence. And here, this tournament's great. They've beaten Minnesota. Or they've beaten Oregon, excuse me.
Yep. They're beating everyone. I think they're the only team with a clean slate on the weekend.
That's very true. Here we have UCF with a loss, UNC with a loss in the other semifinal. Colorado, we saw lose to Pittsburgh yesterday.
Carleton's out, Oregon's out. Those were the powerhouses. Pittsburgh out.
The only blemish on their record would be a loss to Arizona at Pres Day. Colorado here trying to swing almost with 4 handlers back instead of attacking. And as we talked about in the first half, Colorado not taking advantage of not, as I call it, crashing with the handlers and not gaining those yards that are freely available. They're looking for the swing going around. And Colorado also showed an inability to beat Arizona's zone at Pres Day as well. They had difficulty with Arizona, would take away the advantage of swinging. Now against the normal zone, swinging is going to change the angle of attack and going to open things up downfield. But here, Minnesota is very wide already. You're throwing into the teeth of the zone. Giannis with the disc for Colorado.
That throw right there. Horizontal pass. You could have gained a yard or 2 if you just step upfield. The throw can lead you upfield by a yard. You can take that extra pivot or that extra step when you catch the disc. And it's those little things, and that's got to come from the coaches, honestly. You got to be telling your guys how to gain those little advantages, because you're not throwing any big passes where you're gonna gain big chunks of yards. So you really got to gain every little yard you can on all of these little throws.
And here we go, Colorado able to get a little bit of gain through the middle. And that's where a lot of the space is. They have not done a good job of attacking it consistently. Giannis now goes with the hammer over the top, gets Schneider. And here the wind has significantly died down. Colorado showing a little bit more confidence, finally able to work it down to the goal line without a turnover.
And now you got to stay disciplined. Mickle's not out there. You got to make sure you don't throw anything floaty.
We have a call on the play, a stoppage here. Big for Colorado to get back in this game. They're down 8-3. Giannis. Looking for the around, and this floats over the top, tipped in the air. Morrissey can't come down with it.
I want to talk fundamentals. I love to talk fundamentals. That around throw has to be flat. That's why when you're teaching people to throw, don't teach them to throw outside in. Don't teach them to throw inside out. Teach them how to throw flat. Teach them that everything is just a modification of a flat throw. That throw, he put a little too much bend on it, as we see Minnesota coming down to the end zone. A nice flat huck there by Aronson. And those are the throws that are going to allow you to score goals.
Minnesota does score the goal here with a big huck from Aronson. Puts it on the goal line. Minnesota puts it in 10-3. They lead over Colorado. Colorado doing so well to work it down, but fundamentals. Turnover, and Minnesota showing they have the star power here to come back on defense and take advantage.
Minnesota got lucky on that. I mean, they came down to their conservative zone. Colorado did a nice job staying patient, was not challenged on any of the throws, and then they just doinked it near the end zone. That's got to be a flat throw. Pops up in the wind.
Minnesota again up 9-3. Aronson getting set to go, and the rest of the tournament actually here at Easterns has been canceled. We have on the other field site, we've had standing water and dangerous conditions for the players. Everybody expecting nice Wilmington weather, and unfortunately did not get it today, so we'll just be bringing you the semifinals and finals. There are no more consolation games. But even going around the rest of the tournament, Carleton, surprise exit yesterday in pre-quarters against UNCW. Tommy Lamar beating Julian Childs-Walker to the cone for the victory on Universe. Carleton's out. Oregon losing to UCF. Pittsburgh had a 6-2 lead on UNC. UNC took half 8-6 and won 15-11. You have to like a team like Pittsburgh's talents, but their urgency. Yesterday, even though they won handily against Colorado, they nearly sleptwalked through the game.
I'd like to talk to Coach Kazmarek about that. I bet he is really frustrated with his team. If it truly is an effort thing or a sense of urgency thing, that is really frustrating as a coach to have that be the issue.
Colorado, Mickle with the disc. Giannis hammers over the top. He floats this one. Tucker is there. Mitchell able to reel in for Colorado near the sideline. Finds Mickle. Forehand floats to Schneider. Out of bounds, though. Another turnover here for Colorado. They've been able to get so close to the end zone, but they just have not been able to finish. Minnesota's just been better at executing when it counts. Eddie putting it deep for Aronson, gonna curl. Aronson read it right, but just went through his hands. Nager trying to find Mickle, and Mickle, that's a crucial drop on the sideline. Minnesota trying to put it deep again. Wind is still swirling here today in different directions at all points in time, making it very tough to read.
You know, it's definitely windy, but I don't think it's windy enough that you have to be taking shots every single time. It's more of a field position thing, not necessarily always hucking, but knowing that in certain spots of the field, you're either more focused on working it, and in other spots of the field, you're more willing to take a shot. In this case, lots of field to work with. I like that Mickle is taking a shot, but once you get to half field, you need to be less focused on taking a shot. Even if you turn it over, the other team's going to have to go a long ways.
Able to get the dump off. Call on the play. Going to go back. Colorado going to be forced here. And Minnesota, after the long pass, Colorado had so much time. Colorado's got to be hustling to get down there and get the dump off. You got the defense in a compromised position. Colorado is still able to get it off Mitchell.
Got to get it to Mickle here.
Puts it out to space. Cheetah also going for it. Find the open man. Giannis for the goal, and there's a good one for Colorado. Now down 9-4. Mitchell.
Nice read here by Mickle. Mickle, that's his favorite cut from that dump position, is just step into the defender and then fade away. We've seen a pattern of that, the way that he cuts for those dumps throughout the course of the weekend. That one popped up a little bit, but no one reads discs in college as well as Jimmy Mickle in the air. He's truly an all-around player.
It's planned in Colorado. They know they have that chemistry to throw that dump out there to space. Mickle, with his big frame, is going to box out. Nine 9-4, Minnesota leads. Colorado needs to have more success like that and repeat it and fast. As we get even into the later stages of this game, we are only several minutes away, 23 minutes away from soft cap already. Time is against you and the score. Mickle with the pull.
Again, I gotta mention the fundamentals here. That pull absolutely needs to be knocked down. Now you're starting on the cone, trapped in that coffin corner. As we see a pick here, it's the little things that programs do right, and that thing that they didn't do quite right. But there's a big difference between starting on the cone and starting in the middle of the field when you're starting your offense.
Klein puts one up for a 50-50. Mickle gonna get the disc on the sideline for Colorado. Clore going deep. Mickle forced to go upfield for the throw. This one put a backhand out to space. That one got away from the Colorado player. Klein with a disc for Minnesota. Aronson is wide open. Colorado defense needs to be more aggressive. Cheetah. Klein. Eddie. 5 yards out. Cheetah in motion. Inside break for the score from Eddie to Cheetah. 10-4, Minnesota leads.
And that's one of those top 6 guys that Coach Resnikoff was talking about. Eddie. He's not the guy who's making as many big plays as someone like Cheetah or Aronson or the big throws like Klein, but he's a solid handler. He can get you an inside-out break for a goal just like he did there.
Dave Eddie, captain, along with Greg Aronson, Jason Cheetah.
They're taking a look at Captain Eddie and assistant coach Boyd Tallis.
10-4, Minnesota has a sizable lead here, in control of the game. Pull from Minnesota. Chow. Over to Mitchell. Nager along the sideline. Wants to put it deep. Instead, throws behind Schneider. Minnesota is going to continue. Tucker. Simonelli.
Minnesota's really changed their strategy in terms of who they're calling on the line. No Cheetah, no Eddie, no Klein, no Aronson.
Going back to a standard D-line set that we saw from yesterday, Vogel. At this point, when you have a 6-point lead, time Vic. Wind still going around and being variable and swirling, with this one going up for Vogel. Rips it in, Minnesota, 11-4.
That's a tough one to swallow if you're Colorado. You did everything right. You got him on the force sideline. You got him to a high stall count. He bails out, he puts it to space, and a really nice throw. It's about as good as you can do on a stall 9 bail. Just put it to the far corner. Receiver made a nice play, but Colorado's going to have more things start to fall their way if they're going to try to get back in this game, and they look pretty dejected. You can see it in their body language. Coach Shetler trying to bring them in, but it's going to be an uphill climb. And it's got to start with your body language. It's got to start with how you act.
And we're going to go to a commercial here and see if Colorado can indeed mount a comeback. Minnesota leads 11-4. And we're back here in Wilmington, North Carolina. Minnesota leading 11-4 to Colorado. I'm Brian Jones here with Mario O'Brien, showing you our head observer here today, Mitch Dangler. Also observing Julie Morris, Evan Bowles. Mitch Dangler, known for his excellent observing mechanics.
You know, another thing that Mitch Dangler does well is he really knows when to take control of a game as an observer. I've had the pleasure of commentating a lot of games that Mitch has been observing, and very rarely does the game get out of control in terms of aggressive play, in terms of bickering between players. And a lot of times the sign of a good referee or a good observer is when you just don't even know they're there, or when you don't even really mention them, and that's what happens a lot with Dangler.
A lot of players are happy to see him in a game, as you said, clean with the pull for Minnesota. 11-4 lead. Looking like they're going to be sitting pretty in the finals later on today, and they're going to go to get a little bit of reward, get to go inside and rest as the UCF and UNC battle it out in our 1 p.m. game. Giannis Chow for Colorado. Back to Giannis. Another 2-3-2 zone from Minnesota.
You know who we haven't seen a lot of for Colorado is Morrissey. I know he's coming off injury. This is the first time he's played in a while. I'm wondering if that injury is still bothering him, and maybe it's a coach's decision that they don't want to risk it. They want to have him healthy moving forward, but he had a pretty big effect in that first game that we saw Colorado play earlier this weekend. But no Morrissey so far today.
Colorado in general definitely finding more swagger, and I think with Morrissey just opens up so many things to the point where it didn't need to be Jimmy Mickle having to come back and touch the disc too much. Here we have a Huck going flying high. Clore and Klain tipped in the air, and it's going to be Colorado's disc.
The side stack is a really difficult offense to execute in wind because it really relies on one space being open, and it really relies on you being able to break the mark, and break mark throws are just really hard in the wind.
Klain, the wind has definitely picked up here. This one's going to float deep. Tipped in the air. Minnesota can't come down with a foul call. Not sure what we saw about that one on the play.
Nice position there by the receiver. Went up with two hands. I think we're gonna see some contact here, but
after the fact, there's, see here, if no foul ruled. Good call by the observer. Going to be Colorado's disc. Hida Schneider will retain possession.
Bulls getting involved there. Nice work on the hand signals there from Degler.
Very impressive with this Minnesota team. Again, just so far 11-4. This is a team that I thought at the beginning of the season I was going to be watching out for, and then Pres Day, a loss to Arizona, had me suspicious. But here, just a good model of consistency. You're not seeing them get too high or too low, which is, I think, an excellent place to be if you're a team.
And that's what's so great about the college game in Ultimate right now is that I think a few years ago, a loss by a high-seeded team to a lower-seeded team was almost unheard of. And there's just so much more parity in the game. A lot really similar to the college basketball scene, where, of course, the number one seeds, your Indianas this year, your Louisvilles, a lot of the teams.
Even Gonzaga went down last
Gonzaga,
night.
Those teams, of course, are going to be favored, and they're going to win a lot of their games, but it's not unheard of to lose a game. There's so much parity. There's so many good players. There's so many good coaches all across the country that we can't be surprised anymore when a team loses. It's not about that your program is falling apart or your strategy was wrong. Sometimes you just get outplayed by good players. And that's what we saw here this weekend. All the number one seeds not in the semifinals, and it's not like anything is wrong. There's just good teams and good players out there.
11-4. And thanks to Elemental, the power behind all of our streaming today. This is the reason why we're able to bring you the 2 semifinals and finals today at 3 p.m. Next Gen Network powered by Elemental. Nickel with the pull for Colorado. Minnesota getting set up here again, up 11-5. Klain going to look deep for Aronson.
This is a huge throw from Klain.
Josh Klein to Greg Aronson. That flow throw just went on and on. Clore had no chance to make a play on it.
Beautiful throw there from Klein. I'm going to go so far as to say he's probably the only guy on the field who has that throw in his arsenal.
And we're seeing somebody with gloves here on the rainy day able to put it deep.
Shout out frictiongloves.com. Boom.
This one just floating on and on and on. That's 75-yard throw for the score.
And the technique on that throw is actually really, really difficult. You know, at home, you're going to look at that throw and say, oh, that was an outside-in forehand. But if you really go back and look at the angle of release when he let the disc go, you really got to keep that disc actually a bit outside in at the beginning. The wind is going to take its effect and then turn the disc over. Generally, when you're throwing in the wind, you want to put IO on the disc. You don't want an IO shape on the throw. You got to put that little bit of IO on it because the wind is going to make that disc overstable and over-rotate.
Colorado trying to work against a big deficit. Mitchell. Morrissey in the game for the first time in a while. And you already see the difference that Morrissey, it's like someone like Morrissey can bring. He's in the cup the entire time, trying to be aggressive. In Colorado, they're just not staying patient enough, but at least Morrissey's attacking the situation. Tucker. Vic with the disc for Minnesota, going for the inside break and some give it right back to Colorado. Chow. Giannis.
Nice step through there by Giannis.
Mitchell able to continue on. Schneider, Morrissey, Nager. Colorado showing some aggressiveness. Over the top. Schneider reels it in, 12-6.
Morrissey, where have you been all game?
This is the exact aggressiveness that we would have liked to see from Colorado earlier today, but now you're down 12-6. And you came in a little timid because of the wind of elements. Minnesota's able to be in an attacking mode the entire time. And this summer we'll be going on the Next Gen Tour once again. Tour dates will be out this Tuesday. You can find them at nextgentour.com. The best athletes in the college game will tour again this summer. 13 have already been chosen. A few more along the way will make up the team. Jimmy Mickle in Colorado was one of the members last year. Greg Aronson back in 2011. A 12-6 lead for Minnesota. Mickle with the pole. Klein. And Colorado comes out in a zone once again. We saw this a little bit earlier. Try to trap Minnesota to the sideline. Cheetah. Colorado very tight.
Get it off the line. That throw's either got to go immediately zipped across the field or right back to Klein. Nice job by Klein. Now just keep reversing the disc.
And now they're able to get it through. And Minnesota works it for the easy goal, 13-6. They lead.
That's all Klein. His throwing ability has been a huge factor for Minnesota today. Gentleman's handshake there from Aronson to Cheetah.
Let's talk about where we think Colorado stands in the nation picture right now. They go out, they beat a tough Wisconsin team. They hung a little bit with Pittsburgh, but still were out of that game. They haven't rebounded to the stature of where they were several years ago as a semifinals team, a team looking to win nationals. They're now looking to go deep into nationals. It's a different story for a team that won the national championship in 2004, was back there in the finals in 2005, semis in 2007, finals in 2009. They haven't been the same in a couple of years.
And I think that's actually speaks less to how they're doing as a program and more to how the rest of the nation is doing and how good all the other teams are getting. There's just a lot of good teams and a lot of good coaches out there. And you're seeing this the star power of certain teams as they progress through their career really have an effect. I think a perfect example is Luther a couple of years ago. Eric Johnson, you know, surrounded by a cast of great role players, but they were allowed to find success because of that one great player. You know, I think Mikkel is a great player, but you know, I don't know if it's not a knock on his personality, certainly, but he's not the type of player that will choose to just take over a game, and I think that's kind of what Colorado needs at times.
Mikkel is able to take over a game when he's able to cut downfield and when he has a few guys that can deliver the disc. And that's where he's most dangerous. We talked about that earlier with a throw to space on the dump. When he has position, very tough to go up against. Only a handful of players, DiGirolamo from Pittsburgh and maybe even Freistatter from UCF, have the height to deal with that, as well as the athleticism to get up against him.
Aaron Hahn for Oregon.
And we're going to go to a timeout here, commercial, to take a brief break, and we'll be back here at Wilmington. And we're back here in Wilmington, North Carolina, part of Next Gen Network's coverage of 2013 Easterns. I'm Brian Jones here with Mario Bryan. Minnesota trying to put this game away. Tucker with the disc for Minnesota has been deadly so far this game with multiple inside breaks near the end zone, and then really been running the D-line all weekend. Vic with the disc back to Tucker. Vic, Minnesota staying patient. Now Vic goes for the deep pass. Colorado's there with the D, and we have a foul called on the play. Going to come back to Vic.
And we are seeing some excellent defensive pressure here from Colorado. As we look downfield here, notice that the space or the lack of space between each Colorado defender and the Minnesota offensive players.
Play about to get restarted. Vic, vertical stack downfield for Minnesota. Very deep right now. Going to push in. Still enough wind out here to make throws difficult. Over the top. Vogel with the catch. Able to keep it alive for Minnesota. Timeout called by Minnesota. You see here Vogel able to come in, make this grab. Lloyd Vogel with the catch. Second big time grab of the day. Minnesota going to talk things over. Going to try to close out this game. And this is an evidence here, I think, of the coaching that you see from Minnesota is a lot of timeouts. Making sure they use all of it. Even a 13-6 lead, you can come out and work on.
Getting better. That's what they're working on right now, is they're saying, okay, we've got this lead. This one isn't about melting the clock. This is about, okay, let's make sure that we execute this situation well with this group of guys. Notice, no Klain, no Aronson, no Cheetah. This is saying, okay, this group of guys needs to work the disc right now, and let's make sure that they get a quality rep in this situation. This is building for their run at nationals, getting these guys who are not necessarily the starters that time in a big time situation where it's semis, and giving them a chance to execute.
Vogel coming out with a side stack play for Minnesota. They'll get it through the middle, can hang on. Colorado gets the disc back. Mitchell. Morrissey Still have not seen much of him today. Unfortunately, injuries taken a toll. But he was able to make the U23 team with Jimmy Mickle. And on the other side, we'll be joining Josh Klein later this summer in Toronto. USA will have mixed open and women's squads there. That horn is going to signify soft cap. Right now, it's still going to be a game to 15. Minnesota should close this one out. Mitchell to Morrissey. The round continue. Colorado just having good flow with Morrissey on the field. And Chow for the score. 13-7, Minnesota still with a 6-point lead.
Now, speaking of programs, Brian, a lot of programs on the rise, and it'll be interesting to see if some of them stick around after this year. Talking about teams like Florida State. Where was Florida State the last few years? Who even knows?
Coach Peter Vanderbilt actually was one of the Virginia players that helped in that first run when Virginia was able to make it in 2009. Has been coaching for a few years now. Florida State actually got a win in conference play. And old sectionals for those who played recently in the change from UPA to USAU. They actually got a win over Florida. And they're able to compete and going into regionals. They were in the regional semifinal in Southeast last year, but with only 2 bids, they were unable to qualify.
And here they are, potentially on the verge of earning 4 bids this year in the Southeast. 3 for sure. You've got Florida, Central Florida.
Florida State was one of those as well.
And Florida State. All those 3 teams definitely in the top 20. And Central Florida making noise this weekend. We're going to see them in our next semifinal. And knocking on the doorstep, you've got Georgia, I think, sitting there right on the outside,
21st.
Looking in on the bubble, so to speak.
And then Georgia Tech at 22nd. So
the strength of those top 3 teams could even potentially pull some of those teams up because they're going to get matchups at conferences.
Aronson over to Eddie. Minnesota with a 13-7 lead, 2 points away from making finals at Easterns. Plain. Minnesota has just performed well throughout the game consistently. Colorado now switching to a man defense. Cheetah was open up the line, not taken by Boyd. Throws the hammer.
Skipsy hammer, the attempt, maybe? No?
Cheetah was available up the line originally, didn't want to take the shot. Boyd going with the other option.
Minnesota has gone back to their O-line. Cheetah, Aronson, Klein, Eddie.
Colorado throw behind pretty much everybody. Eddie looking to get 1 point closer. Aronson in isolation. Cheetah comes in underneath afterwards. Finding Aronson. Klein in isolation. Cheetah. Finding
Nice
Klein.
throw. Klein going to find that, looking for that IO window again.
There it is to Eddie. Josh Klein and Captain Dave Eddie. Minnesota 1 point away. Lead to 7. This is a pretty safe lead here. Looking forward to our next game coming up at 1 p.m. North Carolina facing off against Central Florida. That promises to be a good one. Very athletic teams across the board. North Carolina playing close against Wisconsin yesterday on Universe. Here we have a replay. See here, Klein, of course, looking for that inside as you described, finding Eddie. And his flick has just been reliable all day long in this weather. Wind still gusting around.
Yeah, it's a crosswind. Wind coming into the face of the camera as you're looking at it from home. You know, Brian, I think it'd be interesting to do a study, getting back to our talk of programs, and what is the common thing that all these programs that are finding success or that are emerging and having good seasons, what is the thing that's giving them that success?
Coaches. Right off the bat, coach for UNC's been there for a couple years, Mike Denardis. UCF coach Roca has made a lot of changes. Last year, UCF at warm-up was a team that was trying to cram it up the far side, go throw after throw down the line. They changed their game, were able to dump swing it, not rely on their superstars. Florida State, Peter Vanderbilt, an experienced guy who's gone through it, is now coaching them.
You know, and I think it's not just that they have a good coach. I think it's really hard for any coach to have a huge effect in their first year, but it's the consistency of having that coach there develop the institutional knowledge of a program. It's a big difference to learn something one year and then go back the next year and be able to sort of have a running start with everything that you've been doing and just develop and fine-tune the offense rather than just learning it. And I think if you look at all the major programs, you see consistent coaching. Oregon, Jay Jannon, got Phil Bowen for Carleton, Jim Shetler for Colorado, got Resnikoff here from Minnesota. Kazmarek's been in the Pittsburgh program for quite a while.
Colorado working through this zone nicely. They've been able to get to the end zone, but have not been able to punch it in. Giannis putting it in for Colorado. They get one on the board, and this is what the Colorado offense needed to look like earlier today. That consistent knowledge, as you said, for the coaches has helped the game so far definitely rise up. In this instance, speaking of rise up, now we've got even more coaching tools to deal with.
Yeah, it's fun. There's so many people in the Ultimate community right now that are just really trying to help it grow and become a stronger community. You know, I think you look at, you know, our organization, Next Gen, who's really trying to provide a service to the community, really focusing on, you know, a very specific goal, and that goal is providing high-level access, or sorry, great quality access to high-level Ultimate, and then, you know, Rise Up, trying to really grow the community from within, make the community stronger, and that really is a different focus than what some of the other organizations are doing in Ultimate right now, speaking specifically of Major League Ultimate, the MLU, the AUDL, and even sort of the approach that USA Ultimate is taking. They're not necessarily trying to make the community stronger as their first goal. They're trying to grow the community, and it's important to differentiate between those two goals. One is trying to grow the number of people in the community, and the other is trying to increase the quality of the people actually playing.
Minnesota going for the win. Cheetah for the win. Minnesota's going to the finals. Jason, the Cheetah, able to carry it off the field by his teammates, waving to the Next Gen camera. Minnesota advances. Colorado just figured out things too late, going down early, an 8-3 halftime lead, and big throw.
And, you know, it wasn't just that they figured out things too late. I really think that Minnesota was the better team here. More skilled players, more depth of talent. I think that, you know, strategy arguably on a similar level for both teams, but you just look at the matchups. If you match up the best players for each team, as you get to that 5th, 6th, 7th best player, Minnesota has the advantage there, and those are the type of things that lead to wins, not only in games like this, but late in tournaments, in the big tournaments.
We've got another game coming up 20 minutes from now, but here Minnesota closes it out 15-8. Our videographers, Ian Lunger, Josh Lowe, our replay operator, Kevin Minderhout, director, Vin Bowie, and of course, our executive producer, also Kevin Minderhout. This is Brian Jones and Mario Bryan signing off here. Next Gen Network's coverage of 2013 Easterns. We'll be back in 20 minutes with the next semifinal, UCF versus UNC.